I'm pretty sure the first voice I ever heard in Christian music was something like this. I listen to the trumpet of Jesus while the world hears a different sound. I mean, seriously, that was the first record I ever bought in Christian music when I was a teenager in Waco, Texas. From that moment, I was changed. I immediately had my mom run me back to the record store and grab One More Song for You, which was your first album. I bought Priority
Right.
first and listened to that first. And my journey began. So, Russ, your voice was my doorway into a 40-year Christian music career. And before we start our conversation, I just want to say thank you on behalf of countless Christian musicians who started their journey because of you and because of your voice and a musical force that blew us away. So please, thank you. Welcome to my podcast, my friend Russ Taff.
Thank you, Andy. You just humbled me. I'm just so thrilled that God used my gift to be at the first part of your gift. Of course, you've been singing a lot long before then, but it's just such a great thing for an artist that's been around a while, and they say, you know what, your music affected me in what I'm doing right now, and it just means the world. It just means the world to me.
Well, we all stand on somebody's shoulders, don't we?
Absolutely.
We're all here because someone lit a fire in us, or maybe fanned a flame that was already going. And you definitely was that to me. So I remember, so my first concert, I remember my very first concert. I grew up in Waco, Texas. My very first concert, I believe, was Amy Grant in like 1979, maybe
Yeah.
78 or 79. My second concert was the Imperials. And you guys came to Waco Hall on the Baylor University campus. And I
Right.
remember you talking about that was your final tour with the Imperials.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that was yeah, I get a little bit of a history lesson there too, just going, oh, bands break up and people move on and do their solo thing. So, and of course I followed you throughout your career, but yeah, yeah, I hadn't heard music like that before in the Christian world because I grew up in a Baptist church.
Right.
All we sang were the hymns, or anything that was a special music was very choral. And I didn't know that there was a Christian music world out there until I picked up the One More Song for You album, or
Right.
I'm sorry, the Priority album, and heard that. So we'll get into that in just a minute, but I would love for you to share maybe the beginning of your journey, how you got into music, maybe how you got into Christian music. Can you take us back that far?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I sang my first solo, Mom Told Me, when I was 5 years old. And it was a small little Pentecostal church. And there was always time. There's only 25 people that went there. And music was such a part of the church. And, I couldn't play sports. I was short and slow, and there's not like a real demand for that.
Same.
But Mom taught me to play guitar, and when I was 11, I guess. And my deal was, because I couldn't play sports, that through the week I would learn a song on my acoustic, and Sunday night I would go and perform that song. And I would take my little cardboard box case with my guitar in it down there and sing. And that was the thing that held me through all the years and affected me. When I sing, it's like chariots of fire, and you've used this line. It's like, when I sing, I feel this pleasure, and it's just
Yeah.
all in that way. But then my brothers, we had a quartet, and Daddy would hold revivals in the summer, a month, worth of revivals, and we would get Statesman records and learn those songs, and then we would perform those. Then I had two older brothers went to Vietnam, so we just kind of broke up as a family group.
Yeah.
I started doing solo stuff, but Dad moved to Arkansas. And how honest do you want me to be?
As honest as you want to be.
Well, I mean, at times the story's ugly, ugly in the sense of, like, things happen that break our hearts.
Yeah,
Things happen
of course.
with, but what God does. So we moved to, well, let me go back. And my daddy was a Pentecostal preacher, very charismatic. And my mother taught me how to sing pretty much. And that little quartet that me and my brothers had, me and Earl, my younger brother, would stand upon the altar, and the three older ones would stand, down beside us on the floor, and we would start doing like a quartet song. And Mom would walk behind us, and if we got off our part, she would help us get on that part. And harmony, it's born in you or it's not.
Right. Yeah. It's just hard to teach it.
Oh, you can't. So anyway, learned harmony as an early age, started doing solo. I remember I was 5 years old, and I remember this. And I would learn a song, and they would let me sing. Well, the choir opening the service did my song, and I just started crying.
This is a song you wrote, right?
Huh?
This was a song you wrote?
Like a hymn that I would learn that, and from that inspirational hymnal. And I learned this song. And when I got to church, the choir or the, song leader would let us in that song. And I just started crying, I just started crying. And one of the deacons or what it was turned over to me. I said, "What's he crying for?" And she said, "Well, they sang his song." And so the pastor said, "Come on up," and made me come up there anyway and sing that song just a cappella. But when I went back to my seat, there would be people that would hand me a dime, hand me a nickel, and by the time I got back to my seat, I had like 85 cents.
Oh man!
Like, whoa.
Wait a second. Okay.
But
yeah.
daddy also had a problem with alcohol. And so there would be my first experience with that is when I was 7 years old. And Dad wasn't at church one Sunday night, and Mom sent me home. And I didn't know what drunk was. And so I ran back. We lived about a half a block from the church, and I walked in the house, and Daddy's bedroom was in the back. And when I got halfway there, I heard singing. Like I'd never heard anybody sing like that and so bad. I mean, it was just slow and slurred. And I walked in there, and it was like some evil spirit had taken over my dad. I did not know this guy. It terrified me. Wow. So I ran back and I got Mom, and I brought her down there saying, "Something's wrong, something's wrong, something's wrong." And when she saw Daddy, she just yelled, "Oh, Joe," and just started bawling and fell down on the floor, holding her head going, "Oh, Joe, oh, Joe, oh, Joe." And I found out that my daddy was an alcoholic before he became Christian. And he was a welder, and he got slag, is what the, stuff that flies off when you weld. He got a piece in his eye. And so he went to the doctor, and they gave him pretty heavy narcotics. And I remember when the narcotics ran out, and Mom was like responsible for his pills. And out of his addiction, he came and asked me if I'd go steal them. And I'm a little Christian boy, and I started crying and ran away. I said, "Dad, I can't do that. I can't do that." But from 7 years old on, we would have maybe 8 months in church or a year, and then he would just disappear for 3 or 4 days. And he would go somewhere and drink and pass out, and drink and pass out, and drink and pass out. In the San Joaquin Valley, where I grew up by Fresno, there was a lot of orchards. You've been out there, and there's orange, groves and all of this. And he would find one and just park there and drink till he passed out for 3 days. And I would have my mother, my older brother at the time, would have to go find him and bring him home. And of course, he loved to preach, but and he would work himself back into the church. It's 20 people, 25, and it's nobody wants to do it. There's no pay in it, and Daddy loved it. It was his fishing and golf, and he was good at it. So he would get sober and work his way, back, and everybody thought he's doing good, and he was for a short time, well, 8 months, and then he would disappear again.
So how long did this go on? Just your whole
Whole life.
childhood, your whole life?
Whole life. But unfortunately, and it was such a hard lesson, and you can add it, right?
Oh yeah, of course. Okay. Absolutely.
I was 13, and they voted my dad out of the church. You can't have a drunk pastor. But my mother, because I was a guy at 13, and I could go, she had me go sit in the meeting so I could tell her who said what. And I sat there and just cried, just cried. They were talking about my dad, and I went home and told her, and just crying. Well, next Sunday night, I take my little cardboard box, case guitar, and go down there. And I walk in the back door, and my uncle had taken over the church. And I walked in the back door, and he grabbed me by the arm, and he said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "Well, Uncle, I've come to sing my song." He said, "No, you're not." I said, "Uncle, I didn't do anything wrong." And he said, "I don't care. You're a son." And that was my first introduction to transferred shame. That at that year, people stopped talking to me from the church. My cousin, who was my best friend, I'd pass in the mall, and he would go to the other side and not look at me. And when I would call to him, at first he wouldn't answer. And so I was just isolated and alone. But what saved me, and if I cry periodically through this, because some of this stuff is still fresh, and the older I get, the more I cry. 13, and they wouldn't let me come anymore. And of course, Dad was drunk, and you can't talk outside the family. I mean, when you grow up, back then, you just didn't talk outside the family. You held those family secrets. But somebody told me that Jesus could be your friend. And Mama had a key to the church, that we had all those years. And when there's addiction in the home, you stay out to 5 in the morning, nobody cares. But I would take that key, and about 10:30, 11 at night, when I knew nobody would be around, I would sneak into that church and feel my way to the front. And I would turn on this little bitty lamp at a table that wouldn't, if you turn the lights on, everybody would see, and it's maybe cops would come or whatever. So I turned that little lamp on. And when you're, 12, 13 years old, it's scary to walk into a pitch black church. But Andy, I would just sit on the altar or kneel down and talk to Jesus at an altar, and just tell him how scared I was, tell him I didn't know what to do, and ask him to help me, that I'm scared. And Andy, I did that for a long, long, long time. There was no Christians around me. Everybody shunned me. But every night I would sneak down there. And one of the worst whippings I ever got in my life, Dad was pastoring, and I told my little friend that Mom and Dad had an argument. And when I got home, my older brother heard me. I mean, Mom, a rageaholic, I wound up laying in the corner, balled up, with her just kicking me and kicking me and kicking, screaming, "You don't talk outside this family," screaming at me. So, you learn to just hold stuff inside.
Yeah.
And it's not a good way to have a marriage. But jumping ahead, I had a little band, and that we formed. Dad was doing good. Dad moved to Hot Springs, Arkansas, because that church there, it was my daddy's cousin, and they said, "We'll help him." They know what's going on. And
Well, that's quite the That's quite the change from from Central California to
Yeah.
Arkansas. Two different types of
No,
living
absolutely.
experience, wasn't it?
Yeah, but that's where Daddy would hold revivals in the summer.
Oh,
You know,
okay.
he'd do like 2 weeks in Hot Springs and then go up to Missouri. Um, so it was familiar. We'd spend like a week there every year. But when we got there, and I've always had a heart for evangelism. I've just always had a heart for evangelism. I think, God put that in me. And
Well, I definitely saw that when we toured together, and that I mean, you reached out to the most far from Jesus people that would show up around the bus or around the church or around the venue. And that's one of the things I always remember about you, Russ, was your heart for people that were far from God.
you know,
And so you're saying that's basically where that came from was during that time in your life.
well, yeah, I didn't know how to use it. I mean, I always had a heart for evangelism, but I didn't know where to take it. I didn't know
Yeah.
how to witness to somebody. And but I put a little band together in Hot Springs, Arkansas when I was there, and there were uh, three of us were seniors and one was a junior, and I think the drummer was um, a junior, and so there were like, well, one or two, and then but Andy, we would get together before the school started, and I would ask them to meet an hour before school started, 3 times a week, and we would just stand around one of the cars, and we'd find a place, and we would pray for that school that they would come to find Jesus.
Mm.
And I knew how powerful music was in my life. So we put a little band together just to play. I was 17. Let's just play some music. And we got pretty good for, 18, 17-year-old boys. But and we played at the park, any place, that we could play. And I asked my dad, God dropped something in me. And I mean, he's the only one. I'm not this smart. Dropped something in me as reach the school. And so I was after the principal for 3 months just to let my band play a song after an assembly. And I guess just to get me off his back, he said, okay. And my little band at the assembly, we played one song, and I invited him out to a Monday night concert. And I'd asked my dad if we could do a concert there that none of the deacons and elders would come to, because our music wasn't like anything they knew. And I remember the first Monday night, it was full. That little church, it was on hold
Yeah.
like 25, and I only knew a couple of scriptures good, for God so loved the world. And I gave an altar call, and the altar was full.
Wow.
And the next Monday night, to the point that we opened the windows and turned the PA up till it was like 10 deep.
So what year would this have been?
It was 1971.
Yeah. So it sounds like it coincides a lot with, I'm sure you've seen the Jesus Revolution,
Mhm.
and it sounds a lot like what the movie portrays there in the late 60s, early 70s of,
Well, I didn't know it was happening anywhere,
yeah.
television. I mean, seeing it, but a real revival broke out. A real revival. I mean, I would be standing changing my clothes for gym class, and somebody would come up and say, "How do I find Jesus?"
Wow.
They'd split me notes. How do I find Jesus? And the little drug addicts in our town became Christians. I mean, there was a revival. They just swept that city. But I didn't know it was happening in California. I didn't know it was happening in Atlanta and LA. I didn't know, but I just knew God was doing something. And we
Yeah.
would play in parks, and I would give altar calls, and they would just flock to the front. It was the most incredible thing. And when we first started, we didn't write, and there was no contemporary Christian music. And
So
so
what was your style? What was the style of music that you were playing?
we ripped the Beatles and changed the lyrics.
Oh, I love it.
We would rip the Beatles
Yeah.
and write,
Can you give me an example of that? Like, do you remember
well,
any of those?
it was stupid. It was stupid. I want to hold God's hand. I want to hold God's hand. I
Yes.
mean, and we did stuff like that because that was the music of our time.
Yeah.
The Beatles were hot, and so that's the kind of music that we did.
That's
And
awesome.
this real revival broke out, and we were trying to bring in a different kind of Christian music to our little town, and and Michael had produced an album for the Imperials back in the early 70s, and it had Jesus Made Me Higher.
Yeah.
Jesus made me higher than I've ever been before.
Yeah. Michael, who you're talking about.
Michael Omartian.
He did. Okay. So
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I thought Michael's first.
Maybe he just wrote the song. That's what.
Oh,
Maybe
okay. Okay. Yeah. Because
think
he's actually, I've actually had him on the podcast, and we talked a lot about those early records that he worked with you guys on. So, but
right.
yeah, well,
But
what a legend.
it was a song or something. I don't remember exactly.
Yeah.
I remember. I didn't know he was, but I found out later that somebody said he wrote it or something. But because I loved his White Horse record. But
yeah, me
so
too.
we raised money to bring them in, the Imperials. They were starting to kind of play with a little different kind of gospel music, and so we wanted to bring anybody, that was different than Southern gospel music, because I knew how this contemporary stuff was moving me. I mean, it was moving me.
Who was in the band? Who was in the Imperials at that time?
Okay, it was that I know Jim and Armin were there. And maybe Sherman Andre. I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, is it Terry Blackwood?
Maybe it was
Sherman.
Terry.
Yeah, because I remember seeing Andrews Blackwood and Company when I was in college.
Right.
In the mid '80s. Yeah, I loved their records.
It was, yeah. Sherman and Terry. That's right. Because they went solo later, right?
Yeah. Well, they did a duet later. Yeah, they went out as a duet, and then
Andrew Blackwood or something like that.
Yeah. Andrews Blackwood and Company, ABC. Yep.
Well, we were going to bring them in, and we did car washes. We did bake sales, anything we could. We never had any money, but we raised enough money that they said they would come in, like on a Tuesday night.
Yeah.
For those of us like you and me that travel, Tuesday nights is you're waiting for the weekend.
Yeah, Tuesday's a discount night. Just get us to the next. Just pay us enough to get us to the next venue.
Help us put gas in the bus.
Yes, exactly.
So they came through and they let us do 20 minutes before they came on, and my little band, we did 5 songs. And I knew that they were going to invite us up for an encore at their encore. And I was just so thrilled, that we could bring somebody that was not the Blackwood brothers, and to kind of verify what we were trying to do. And they came in and we did 20 minutes and we did the encore, and they left. Well, our little band broke up, and I started traveling then with an evangelist, just singing songs at his services, and which was good because that's when I really started learning the Bible. Just really started learning the Bible. Was traveling with this guy who was a great Bible teacher, and out of nowhere, after that concert, 2.5 years later, I got a call from the Imperials, Joe Mascale, and he said, "We remember you." I mean, 2.5 years later.
Wow.
And he said, "Would you come to Nashville and try out for the group?" But I tell you, Andy, I didn't jump on it. I tell you why. I trusted this evangelist I was traveling with, and I was learning the Bible, and I was happy. And I told him, I said, "If you tell me or ask me not to do this, I won't. I'll stay with you." And he said the most incredible thing. He said, Russ, this would be like Oral Roberts calling me to come and travel with him. And he told me, and he said, whatever you decide to do, I'm going to consider it the wisdom of God, and I will
Wow.
support you in it. And so anyway,
That's awesome.
I was 22 and moved to Nashville and started making records and touring with the Imperials.
So were you married yet? Had you met Tori yet?
We had married, man, maybe 2.5 years before I joined him, but we didn't have any money, and she really supported me. She knew and believed that this is what I was supposed to do. So
Yeah.
we saved money, and we couldn't afford to get married. Even my little salary that I was getting from that evangelist, and so we had kind of, okay, now we can do it. I was getting a salary from that evangelist and that sort of thing. And then when the Imperials hired me, it was a little more money than what I was making. And so while I was on my first tour with the Imperials 3 weeks, she and her parents came to Nashville and we looked for an apartment. And so I got married when I was 22, joined the Imperials when I was 22, and started traveling with them. But you know, Andy, like you, I didn't pursue any of this.
Yeah.
Like
I
you,
didn't. Yeah.
you didn't either. God just
Mm-mm.
opened doors. Andy, go here. Andy,
Yep.
go here. Andy, go
Yep.
here. And he
That's
continued
exactly right.
to do so. So,
Wow.
you know, I was talking to a friend of mine a while ago, and we were talking about the gift that God gave me. And he's one of the guys that I talk to, and he's strong Christian. And he reminded me, he said, Russ, you can't take any credit for your gift. None. He said, I know you worked and vocalized and wrote songs. He said, but that gift was given to you, you know, when you were 5 years old. It was there. And but like you, Andy, and we both know this, when you realize it's his, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and that we have to be stewards of it and keep it, work at it, and then God brings other areas in our lives that we work at besides music. And but you and I, over the years, we learn to be diligent with what God is asking us to do. And but I just can't take any credit. I didn't come and audition. I mean, in the sense of like, I'm calling the Imperials. I heard you
Yeah.
got an opening. I heard you got to know me. And they hired me that night when I tried out. Um,
Oh, they would have been foolish not to. I
well,
mean,
you know, I didn't realize they were auditioning. But, you know, when you're 22 and you don't know who you
yeah.
are
Yeah.
and you know how good you are, and you
Yeah.
think, look at all these people around you that are making records and stuff.
Yeah.
And nobody tells you that you're really, really good. So I was shocked, you
Yeah.
know.
I was 20. I was 20 when I started my journey. Same thing happened. I got a cold phone call, like
Yeah,
a cold call from Roger Breland, who ran Truth, and just said, "Hey, I heard you could sing from somebody else and would like to invite you out to audition." I went, "Okay."
right,
Like,
right.
yeah.
And
I never
not
thought anything more than I'm like, okay, I'll go out and sing a few songs and we'll see what happens.
exactly, you know, God just maneuvers. He just
Yeah.
maneuvers. And
Yeah.
I know from your childhood, you know,
Hmm.
he was leading you to truth, and he was
Yeah.
leading
That's right.
materials,
That's right.
but for both of us, you know, God just maneuvered. And
That's right.
so I'm glad he did, because we can't look back and say, I did this and I did this.
Right.
And you're, for the time, you were touring and singing with the biggest gospel group in the country, in my opinion.
Which was modeled after your Imperials group.
Yeah, you
I
told
mean,
me that. You told
that's
me
who
that.
we wanted to be. That you were the inspiration for us, because those records for all four of us were so um, they were transformative. They were building blocks for us to go, okay, this is possible. Even trying to hire Michael Amardian later on in our career to be our producer was like, that's full circle for us, you know? And yeah, so that again, just so grateful to be able to spend time with you and talk about your journey, because it's important to me just to pay, and I pay homage is a weird way to say it, but just to say thank you again. And I'm going to probably say that several
I,
times through this this conversation. Let me ask you this. What was the first record you recorded with him? Was it Heed the Call? Was
No,
it before that?
it was a record that Brown Bannister did and Chris Christian, and it was called Sail On.
Oh yeah, Sail On. That's right.
Yeah, that was the very first one that I did. In fact, it was Buddy Huey from Word. He had Gary Paxton do the first one in 1977. I joined the group in 76. And it was a little more Ford freshman kind of thing.
Yeah.
So he just said, you know what, we need something different. You know, you guys are just repeating who you've been all these years, repeating records. And so, but it had the song Sail On and different ones like that. And
Was
so that,
Watergrave on that record? Now
yeah,
that one blew my mind because that was about the most aggressive
it was.
Christian song I'd ever heard when I went back and picked up that record. That was amazing.
It's interesting, Andy, that, and I've told you this, but when that record came out and that song was on there, pastors for 2 years, pastors would tell us when the Imperials were going to sing in a church. And even some promoters that brought us in said, you can do anything off that record except that song.
Wow.
It was a request, don't do that. But then, 2 years went by, now they're using it at baptismals and requesting it in church. But it's creative.
Yeah. Well, it's like you listen to classic or you listen to pop radio now, and you hear Nirvana on soft rock radio, and you're like, man, I remember when that was like couldn't get played anywhere in anybody's home because it was so, it was so outside. It was too much. It was too much. Yeah. But now it's commonplace, right?
It's like the Eagles sound like a country band now.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Yeah. And I remember, man, I think one of my favorite records when I go back, you can't find it online anymore, but I actually have the vinyl over here of the live record you did at First Baptist Church, Waco, Texas. And that was it was the live Sail On record. And I heard that, I remember picking that up just before I started getting into singing with groups, and it was before I got into Truth. And I remember thinking, okay, that's, if I could do that, if I could be in a group like that, that's something that I feel like would be something I really want to do. But yeah, I'm sorry, I'm kind of all over the place for the records because just talking to you, I have all these memories of, man, this record and that record. Okay, let's jump in now to one more song for you. Okay. Because that was again, I had Omar on the podcast here just recently, and he talked about a little bit about how quickly that album was made and how different it was for you guys, and just some of the stories in the studio about making that record. I want to know some of your memories about getting in the studio with Michael Amardian to make one more song for you.
Well, with the Imperials, and I loved after our little band and not knowing any other contemporary Christian music. I didn't know it was out there. But I got the White Horse record. I don't remember what year. And my memory is so long ago, I just but I knew the name Michael and Michael Amardian. And when his name was mentioned, I just said, yes. We got to. And, but unfortunately for me, for that record, we didn't get to see it made. The Imperials, a few of those records that, pretty much the Imperials records I did with them was we'd fly in and do the vocals. But I would fly in, and I was able to sit with Michael and watch him work just for those 7 days that I was there. And he was the first one, Andy. Him was the first one that told me that I was good. Honestly, God, whole life. And what Brown Bannister did too, but I mean Omar, and it's funny. And I'll just be honest, and it's fine. Armin's passed away, but for me, when I would go in, Word being in Waco, Texas, and I was already doing a whole lot of the solos. But when we would go to Waco, I couldn't get off the bus and go inside. They would make me stay on the bus, but they didn't want anybody talking to me. but nobody told you that you did good, just to kind of keep you in this place. And, we don't want to encourage him too much. And I shared just a little bit of that with Michael, and I will love Michael the rest of my life. Just for this, I love him, both of us do, for all kind of things that he
Yeah.
did for music. But I'd mentioned that to him, and Armin had come in to listen to something. I was sitting at the board with Michael, and Armin's right behind us. And Michael said, I mean, I'll cry talking about this because it was such a profound moment that Michael, that connected us still to this day. But you're just wanting somebody to tell you that you're doing good,
Mhm.
That little church I grew up in, it was like, don't tell them they're doing good, they'll get you big hit. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I would never really, but when I did it, I felt God, and I continued. But that day in the studio, Michael turned around, spoke to Michael over his shoulder, said, that vocal's incredible, isn't it, Armin? What Russ just said, that's incredible, isn't it? And Armin was like, well, and he go, no, that vocal was awesome. And he stayed on Armin until Armin says, yeah, that's a real good vocal. That's a real good vocal. But
Wow.
Michael was the first one to say, Russ, you're special. You're
Wow.
just special. So, I mean, that was my first memories of Michael, and it was so profound.
You
So
feel like that
profound.
was a little bit of a fatherly influence for you
Yeah.
to get that validation from a father figure like that?
I mean, to somebody that was so big, and for him to say, hey, I worked with a lot of people
Yeah.
and you're good, that you're good. It was validation. It's like, oh my Lord, oh my Lord. This guy thinks I'm good, so I must be pretty good. But that changed me that day, that I began to view myself differently, and I got more confidence to
Yeah.
do what. But yeah, Michael is still, I don't know, he's still a monster in my life, even though we don't get to talk a lot.
Yeah. Same thing for me. I can't, I make people crazy when they drive with me in the car and we listen to 70s radio or yacht rock radio. And
Yeah.
I'll say, oh,
Well,
do you know that's Michael Amardian playing keys here? Oh, did
yeah.
you know Michael Amardian wrote that? Do
But
I know Michael Amardian.
yeah, but you felt that same
Yeah.
fatherly thing when you were,
Yes.
for him, and he encouraged you, and he
Uh-huh.
said go. And with Michael, it was more than just he was a minister, and
Yeah.
that,
Mm-hmm.
and you felt the same thing I did.
That's right. So you and I have talked about this, and if you don't want to share this, it's okay. We'll move on to something else. But I think it's such a good part of the story because I took a lot from it. And it actually happened in my life a little later on after you shared this with me. But uh, you mentioned that there was a little bit of tension between you and the other members of the group, maybe
Yeah.
mostly Jim and Armand, maybe not so much Dave, but
No. No.
um, but that it got a little tense out on the road, and you're now, had you already recorded a solo record? Had you recorded Walls of Glass during that
Oh, not
time?
when I was with the Imperials. It was after
Okay.
the Imperials. That
Okay.
was
So yeah, I remember you telling the story to me one time about that moment when you knew it was time for you to leave
yeah.
and go do your own thing, but you couldn't go yet.
Right.
Yeah. Can you want to share a little bit about that?
Well, yeah. Yeah. And again, it's been so long, so much water in the bridge that I can talk to you honestly.
Sure.
It's upsetting, but I Jim Murray was that Irish tenor that was the star. I mean, he outsang Terry, he outsang Sherman, and I mean, and he would get big applause when they would introduce him. And I tell you, and I was just so happy to be there. I didn't but all of a sudden, with starting with Brown, when we did that classic of that Imperial record that had the thing on the front of it, that logo kind of thing, that had
Yeah.
praise the Lord and oh
Oh,
Buddha.
praise the Lord. Oh my gosh. Don't even start there because I'll start to cry with that song. That
Right.
just what a standard that was. That was the Heed the Call record.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden, Jim just really started attacking me. I mean, because I was taking attention away from him, and they were starting to do songs that they couldn't sing. I mean, Jimmy is not. I mean, Michael really worked with him in the studio to make him fit. But I started getting more attention and more attention, and I remember the first record that we did, that Chris Christian did, and basically Brown Bannister did it. Chris just sat there and read Billboard. But yeah, I mean, and Brown was new, and so he did all the work.
Yeah.
But working with Brown, and he was an encourager. Michael was a huge encourager. But when I was with the Imperials, and Michael even encouraged me later, and you hadn't really established in your mind, I mean, that you're good and that you have a talent that can be used outside the Imperials. And Jim started attacking me. And he was actually having a hard time with his wife. And he would bring it out on the road. And I was stealing his thunder. But yet they wouldn't go to a producer and say, all right, Russ is getting a lot of solo. In fact, first album, man, that I did, Sail On. I remember standing out in front of Chris Christian's house, and I said, Armin and Jim, this is a quartet, and already I've got more solos than anybody. But they didn't go tell the producer; they just took it out on me.
Huh.
But anyway, that's where they were in their parts of life. But Jim, I mean, before I went on stage, he would attack me. Just attack me. Who do you think you are? You know better than anybody else. And I mean, it just verbally attacked me. And man, I'm young. And you'd have to walk out on stage, but his home life, I didn't realize how bad it was later. But I mean, Armin would call songs and he would say no. He was so miserable, and Praise the Lord was so huge. And I would set it up, just pork little, God has praise with people. And he would stand behind me and he would just shake his head no. It was, he was hurting inside, and because he was my boss.
Yeah.
He could do whatever he wanted. And it's like, okay, you can stay or leave. But I'd heard a sermon, and that it's easy to love people that love you, but can you love the unlovely? And I knew what the sermon was about when I heard it, and I knew that I could not leave yet, even though I wanted to. Man, it was miserable at times. But will you walk in love with the unlovely? Will you walk in love with those that are actually hurting you? And can you walk in love? And I said, if it Hair Lips, Texas, I'm going to walk in love with this guy. And I began to change. When he would come up and, attack me before he went on stage, I just wouldn't respond. I just wouldn't respond. And I would go out and sing, and then I would go back to the bus. And I stayed away from it, as best I could. In fact, I started traveling on the band's bus. Us singers, Armin had bought a new MCI and had 4 suites for the singers. And I took the sound guys bunk on the band's bus and traveled there for a year and a half, just to keep, keep that influence.
Yeah. And hey, let's be honest. Sometimes getting on the band bus or the crew bus is actually a better experience because you kind of wipe off all that fame and glory and get into with the working guys, and You can, it's
Right.
a little bit better experience sometimes, isn't it?
But they were my age,
Yeah.
Jim Marvin and Dave, they were 10 years older than me. So,
Yeah.
but these guys were my age, and we were listening to same kind of music, and it was
Yeah.
peaceful. It was
Hmm.
peaceful. And but I knew I couldn't leave. I wanted to. I prayed and begged God, let me go. But in my and that check in my spirit,
Mm.
I knew I couldn't. I just knew I couldn't. And we were in Lincoln, Nebraska, I believe, and it was Tuesday night dinner theater. And uh,
There goes that, there's that
Tuesday,
Tuesday night again.
yeah.
Something happens on Tuesday nights in the touring
But
world,
let
doesn't
me.
it?
I'm going to step back just a minute. I'll step back just a minute because I was singing a whole lot of solos and getting a whole lot of attention, but I got no record royalties. And I never got more than $425 a week. That was
Wow.
my pay. And they were buying Jim and I bigger houses, bigger Mercedes, and they're old school. They're just old school. And I remember me and Tori talking. We were so young and so nervous that we were wanting to just let us, give me something, And I remember having Army come over to our little apartment. Tori, I'm so nervous. And I asked Armin, I said, I'm not getting anything except a weekly salary. And I said, could I get just 2% of the record sales a night, 1%, just something? And would it be possible to get a raise? And he sticked out his arm. I'm sure if you can see, he'd lift up his arm like this to his shoulder. And he said, Russ, there's men that will take your place in a heartbeat.
Wow.
And I realized that I'm not going anywhere. And then with the gym situation, when I got my final release Tuesday night in Lincoln, Nebraska, Dave walked up out front to say, I still love you, Lord, in that same old fashioned
Mm.
way. And Jim turned to me and he said, Russ, I love you. I was gone in
Wow.
4 weeks. It's like I passed the test. That's what
Wow.
God wanted. With all the other stuff, money, record royalty, all of that. It was like, can you love the unlovely?
Wow. And
And I
can you
did.
stay, and can you stay when it's hard? And I think that's lost on generations past, that, or the younger generations, is, can you stay when it's difficult? Can you stay when you're being attacked? Can you stay when you're not given the respect you think you deserve? And man, again, thank you for sharing that story early in my career to me, because it helped me in so many of the situations that were about to come into my life. That, hey, stay even when it's difficult, and God he'll let you know. He'll let you know when it's okay and when it's time to go.
But make sure you leave not angry, not angry, not
Right.
angry, because that will eat at you the rest of your life.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm telling you, and you know as much as I do about this stuff. But yeah, that's where it separates those that are in it for the ministry.
Yeah.
Because they will stay. With not a lot of money, they will stay because they know God has called them to do this, and so whatever ahead, they will do it. And those are the ones that I believe are called to the ministry.
Yeah. And,
I feel
I was just going to say, I love that we got to see the four of you sing. We did that little event in Nashville, like 2016, 2017.
yeah,
And we shared a dressing room with the four of you. And I have a picture. I'll post it. I'll post it somewhere when this interview airs. And
yeah,
it was just so cool, having heard your stories of all that time, to see the four of you come back together and be brothers and sing those songs again. And then just to stand there with you, and man, just incredible. So let's start now with, of course, Walls of Glass. Oh my gosh, just, again, for me, and I know I speak for so many people my age, and especially musicians, that Walls of Glass was like, here's another transformative record. And tell me about how you prepared for that album. Were you preparing for that album while you're still in the Imperials, or did you have to take some time before that all happened?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have a vision for a solo record. I just knew I wanted to, and it was 2 years before that record came out. Um, but I always wanted to make a record from beginning to end. I just wanted to see the whole process and be in the middle of it and watch it go down and learn, learn is how to make a record. And Bill Sinead produced it, and in fact, Omarty was supposed to do it,
Yeah.
and he told you the story, I'm sure.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And so he hooked me up with Sinead, and we started the record. But I mean, I can't tell you. Well, you know how exciting it was. You go to fly to LA, and you're going to be in the studio with Jess Picaro, who was in Toto, and James Newton Howard now that played on every. I mean, and these are best of the best of the best. Nathan East, who
Wow.
tours with Eric Clapton, and I mean, I just sat there with my mouth open. In fact, let me tell you a quick little story.
Okay.
I had sat down because I hadn't been around that. The tracks were already cut when the Imperials flew in. So I had my little notes of what I would like the bass to do, what I'd like the guitar to do.
And you're bringing these suggestions to these like A studio players, man, the greatest of all time.
I opened my mouth one time and I never opened it. Play whatever you want. Play whatever you want.
Incredible. Incredible. I have a story about Omar. I have to tell you that on the same thing. I don't remember which record we were making, but we were in his studio in Brentwood at his home, and he and I were arguing a little bit over a vocal part. And I was like, hey, it would be really great if we did the BGVs like this. He goes, no, man, I already got it in my head. Just go sing this. And he'd sing it to me. And I go, okay, that sounds good. But what can we just try my idea? And he said, okay, do what you're going to do, Crispin. You're going to walk down that hallway right there. Go get you a cup of coffee. And then when you come back, you tell me what you just saw. And in that hallway from floor to ceiling, I know you've been there, from floor to ceiling were platinum albums that he was a part of. And I just remember going, okay, you win. I'm sure you're right. You'll have the best idea. Did he play on that record? Did he play on the Walls of Glass? He had to have played the Jeremiah solo, right?
Well, and it's actually, I always loved that song. Loved that song.
Because was that from Adam again, or was that from Whitehorse?
Oh, I don't remember.
Yeah, it was off of one of those records.
I don't remember, but I always loved it. And we'd already, Tori and I had written some, and we'd gathered some, and we were in the studio with Michael.
Yeah.
And he was playing on some things. And I went out to the piano where he was hanging out for a minute. I said, Michael, do you remember Jeremiah? And he just ripped off that lick.
Oh, man.
And I just went nuts. And I said, we got to cut it. We got to cut it. We got to cut it. So he pretty much produced that track. But as groove wise, that's probably one of the best groove songs I ever cut.
Oh, my gosh.
Jeremiah.
Yeah. Yeah. And it goes so many different places.
Yeah.
And what a song. They just don't make Christian music like that anymore. I mean, that was landmark. Yeah.
And not too many talk about the old prophets in Christian songs.
Yeah, right. Exactly. You get a little bit of an Old Testament lesson in that song. I know I did.
I didn't know what Obadiah did.
Yeah. I still, when I'm reading through the Bible and I get to the minor prophets, that song's just going through my head over and over and over again. Incredible.
My piano player, Larry, and we played together for years, but he practiced and practiced and practiced and practiced and practiced till he got to a point after months and months that he could do that lick. And I remember he was so proud of himself. And then we did the song, once he got that down. But hey, Andy, could I have 3 minutes to run up and get the charger for my
Absolutely.
iPad?
You bet.
Give me just 3 minutes. I'm running it.
All right. Sounds good.